Yeah. Okay. So these are some ideas we can use, also using the different levels that Plato shows us, that we can, when we see the news, we can ask ourselves, okay, what assumptions are used in the news? What is it based on? Why is it news? Why is this journalist writing something about something? Which aspects play a role in that was mentioned, but also with what aspects do we look at the news? What are we looking for? Are we just looking for to read the things we already believe, just to affirm our own convictions, or are we really looking for something new? And are we open to maybe other perspectives? And what assumptions also do we use? Okay, just some ideas. So let's go back to the next subject, because of course this is linked to this idea of truth, also to how the state, for instance, is ruled, and also a very actual topical subject, I think. There was not so long ago this research in the Netherlands that there actually is a lot of distrust in politics, in the government, in banks, in companies. And to prepare for this lecture, I just entered Google, and the first results already came that this is a global thing, that the trust in government is actually collapsing around the world, research says. And if you look, these are some stats of a lot of countries they researched, and they also discovered that there is quite a gap between income groups. So in the purple you have the high income groups and how they trust, their level of trust in the government, and the green is the low income group, and that actually the gap for a lot of countries is quite big. I think the Netherlands here scores, for instance, ranks number 20. So there's also quite a difference in different groups within our country. So a very topical thing. And this Plato describes actually how the loss of insight in truth also leads to decay in the way the state is ruled. And he describes also in the state the decline of 5 types of states, state constitution forms. Actually also corresponding to constitutions of the soul, Plato says. So he doesn't make a difference between the constitution of the state and the constitution of the soul. So if there is in the soul something, a tyrant going on, you also see that mirrored in the state. So, and he describes this decline in 5 steps. So first you have the aristocracy, that is the constitution of the best, or those who are the most apt to rule the state. And when there is a conflict in the ruling class, then their democracy comes in place. That is the state of the ambitious, where also the people that how do you say that that are after honor. And they are also out for war to defeat other countries for their own honor, like what you see before, for instance, in when you have a military coup, you have such sort of democratic state, you might say. And then you have the oligarchy, that is the the ruling of the rich. You might see that, for instance, in France under the Louis XVI, and then after oligarchy comes democracy. Then you see the French Revolution, and democracy is installed, and where the people are in power. And then after democracy comes tyranny, where the tyrant is the ruler. So you see that democracy in Plato's description is not a very good form, but it's not really about the form, it's more about what characterizes these constitutions, and we will go into that further. So let's look further into democracy, because that's for us, of course, the most interesting. And Plato describes the following about this constitution. He says it's full of freedom. You have freedom of speech, and everyone is licensed to do what he wants. And he also calls it like a supermarket of constitutions, because you can just pick out what pleases you. And he says it's actually the most beautiful of constitutions. It's like a coat embroidered with every kind of ornament, and there is no requirement whatsoever not to rule or to serve. Even if you are the best one to do so, you just only do it when you want it. It's very tolerant. It's completely lacks any form of small-mindedness. So if people are saying something about someone else, that is called small-minded very quickly. And he who wishes the majority well is honored. Insolence they call good breeding in democracy. Anarchy they call freedom. Extravagance they call magnificence. And shamelessness they call courage. And if we look at the Democrat, it is one whose life is ruled by all kinds of unnecessary desires. He lives on, yielding day by day to the desire at hand. He is drunk the first day, and on a water and a diet the next. Then he's into physical training, then he's idle, he's lazy and neglects everything. And sometimes he even occupies himself with what he takes to be philosophy. And then he likes soldiers, then he likes money making, and he's going from this to that. He often engages in politics, leaping up from his seat and saying and doing whatever comes into his mind. But many men and women might envy his life because he can do whatever he pleases for the time being. So and then Plato describes how democracy leads to tyranny, because he says there's so much freedom that this insatiable desire for freedom will finally lead to tyranny. And also some quotes he has about the end of democracy. He says that is when a father accustoms himself to behave like a child and fear his sons, while the son behaves like a father, feeling neither shame nor fear in front of his parents in order to be free. A teacher in such a community is afraid of his students and flatters them, while the students despise their teachers or tutors. And in general, the young imitate their elders and compete with them in word and deed, while the old stoop to the level of the young and are full of play and pleasantry, imitating the young for fear of appearing disagreeable and authoritarian. So he says there will be formed in this state three groups. You have the fierce rulers, the people with a big mouth, and that is the dominant class, because they are very fierce, brutal. They do all the talking and acting, and therefore they can make a career in politics and become the rulers. Then you have the rich on the other side, those who already had all the money. And actually these two are really opposed to each other. So there's a constant battle going on between the politicians at the one side and the rich at the other side. The politicians, they try with all kinds of taxes, etc., to get as much as money from the rich as they can, to also a little bit for the people to so they don't get angry, but a lot of it also for themselves. And the rich are constantly trying to influence politics by all kinds of impeachments, judgments, trials. So they are trying to slow down the progress in government. And actually the people is the third class, and they have the shortest straw. And then the people are fed up with this because they are the biggest group, and then they choose one strong man to end all this. Because, like Plato also said, it's the habit of setting up one man as the special champion is the habit of the people. And then this man comes into power, and he comes into power getting the favor of the people because he does all kinds of empty promises, saying that he will divide all the land and all the money between the people. And of course, these are empty promises because he cannot hold true to them. And then to deviate from that, he goes into stirring up wars, so that the people will continue to feel the need of having such a leader. Slowly the people will recognize that they'll become poor because they have to pay all these taxes to get the war going on. And during that, also the tyrant, the dictator, has all the means for violence, all the weapons, etc. So he also is not afraid to use that against his opposers. And then slowly this dictator has everyone against him, but he has also all the power, and the people realize that they raised a monster and they are themselves the weaker party, and they have to fight to get the leader to take the power from the leader. Well, I'm afraid that we can just let Plato speak for himself if we look at the news today. There are many similarities, people that do not value the truth, that are not afraid to put people up against each other, trying to silence their opposers, also stirring up war, unfortunately, making all kinds of promises they cannot keep. But of course, in the end, it's also the people that can end the power of such a tyrant. And you see that, for instance, how we also, because of the fear that is spread by the tyrant, if we are not afraid to stand up against that, it can be over within days. You saw that, for instance, with the Romanian dictator Ceausescu at the end of his days, that there was this communist leader had one of the speeches, and then all the people had to come to clap for him, etc. And then when he had the speech, one of the people in the crowd started booing, and then another started booing, and then suddenly the whole crowd was booing at him, and then within a few days it was over. So it's also the people if they overcome fear, that they can end this rule from a dictator. But maybe we can prevent this from happening, of course, in the first place, while we have a democracy, and it's not the democracy that has to lead to tyranny, I think. This is only in Plato's metaphor. But also in democracy, we can have the right characteristics for the leader and choose a Mandela instead of, let's say, an Erdogan. So it's also back to us. What is the motive that we use for voting for such leaders? So that's something that we can use for that is the insight that Plato gives in the cave, and that we can discern between also different forms of freedom, because freedom itself, I think, is not the problem. It's what is the freedom focused on? Is it the freedom of doing what you want, saying what you want, of desiring whatever you want, or is it the freedom of thought, of conscience, like the freedom we have in our states, for instance, in the Netherlands, where what was the basis of our constitution. So we can use this lesson from Plato to also have a more harmonized state. And after the break, I will describe what is Plato's idea of this state in harmony, and also what it means for us, how to get there. So that is after the break. If there are any questions for now, then now's the moment. No? Everything clear? Then let's have a break.